Last time we left Gus and Mustang Milo, they were on the heels of Frisky Frank, a sinister outlaw that tried to force an outcome of a duel in his favor. Now the two are in hot pursuit, following the freshly laid tracks of Frank's horse, but little did they know that Frisky Frank had already made it back to the gang hideout and was cooking up a plan to get the cowboys back for the embarrassment they caused him. Frisky gathered his posse around and decided Roscoe would keep a lookout for the two. Milo and Gus picked up their speed, confident they would soon be bringing Frank back to judgment. Suddenly, Milo called for them to stop. He sensed something was wrong. Gus pointed and noticed that the tracks seemed to be leading off to a canyon off to one side. Milo's eyes darted side to side. He had an uneasy feeling. A short distance away, Roscoe watched from a ledge. He turned to report back to Frank, but as he did, his revolver caught the sun and reflected back to Milo. Milo looked towards the lead and pieced together what was happening. He looked at Gus and nodded because he had a plan. Roscoe ran up to Frisky Frank and told him the news. "The two cowpokes are over the ridge."
"You and Willie head out and meet them then,"
Frank replied. The two criminals took off. Outside the cave, Gus cautiously trotted up. He was just a short distance away when the outlaws popped up and held their guns out and walked to meet the men. The two criminals exchanged curious looks, but then led Gus to custody. Once inside, Frisky Frank saw Gus walk in and looked at him intently.
"Where's your pal?"
Frank barked, but Gus only shrugged his shoulders.
"Did you say there was two?"
Frank questioned, but no one had any answers.
"Well, never mind that,"
Frank said, then turned to Gus.
"I thought we had resolved this back in town."
Gus stays silent for a moment, then reaches in his pocket. He pulls something out and gestures it to Frank.
"What is that?"
Frank asked.
"Grab it from him and bring it to me."
Willie grabbed it from Gus and began to walk to Frank. Suddenly he stopped and looked at what he was holding. He was frozen in fear.
"What is it? What's wrong?"
Frank repeated. Willie's eyes widened. He looked up. It's catnip." All the outlaws jolted their head to Willie, their eyes all wide.
"Put it away!"
Frank yelled, but it was too late. All the other gang members jumped up over their chairs and on top of Willie. A thick dust filled the room. Nothing could be seen or heard over the commotion. Struggling to breathe, Frisky Frank was able to emerge from the crowd and get away without falling prey to the dreaded catnip. He crawled out of the cave and got his composure, but he was no longer alone. Directly ahead of him on the trail stood Mustang Milo, gun drawn and eyes fixed.
"You!"
Frank growled as he reached for his gun, but the click of a revolver's hammer being pulled back made him freeze. Gus had emerged from the cave, and the two cowboys had him surrounded. Frank's eyes darted side to side, watching both men, ready to make a move at any moment. The air was so silent the tension was unbearable. After a few moments, Frank knew he was no match for the two cowboys that had outsmarted him and his gang. Frisky Frank dropped his gun to the ground and surrendered to Milo and Gus. They tied him up, loaded him on Gus's horse, and headed to the sheriff to turn him in. Mustang Milo and Gus went on to become an incredible team and an unstoppable force across the West. The